Okay, thanks everybody for joining this today's happy hour free speech, as it is happening each Strasbourg week in the European Parliament on Mondays at 6 p.m. We had our innovation in taping the discussions already a few months ago. Today it's the very first time that we also have a live stream online. I'm at least confident that it works, so I welcome everybody in the live stream. Caroline Pachema, head of staff, says it's working, obviously, so we will have the live stream now and we will have a tape afterwards. I'm more than happy that, as always, we can address something important, which is maybe not part of daily politics as we usually deal with in this very European Parliament, and which is also connected to daily politics, of course, and I'm sure the one or the other will address daily issues. It's a very beautiful birthday. It's the 75th birthday of the State of Israel, the only Jewish state on earth, the only rule of law-based democracy in the Middle East, a strong partner for the European Union. And the subtitle of our today's discussion would be to continue the success story. 75 years of the State of Israel, to continue the success story. I intend to switch to German now, because the live stream is obviously also spread in my home country, Austria, and maybe the one or the other want to listen to it in German language. That's also the moment when I want to thank the interpreters again, also this week, for translation into German, English and French, and to make it happen that we can have the discussion in a very positive and transnational, translingual way, I would say. We have online connected, beside the great panelists sitting on this panel, physically online connected Anders Persson, who was recommended to us for today's discussion by the European Parliament Research Service, EPRS, as an expert on the EU-Israel relations. Mr. Persson, I intend to hand over the floor to you for the first round as the last speaker and for the last round as the first speaker then. And I want to begin with my dear colleague in the European Parliament and my president in the Transatlantic Friends of Israel group, interparliamentarian and the multi-partisan group in this very parliament, Anna Michelle Asimakopoulou from Greece. Anna, thanks for all the endeavors we can conduct together, and especially for your presidency in our Transatlantic Friends of Israel group, where I have the pleasure to serve as a chairman. Thanks for that, and thanks for joining today's discussion. I promised to switch to German, now I really do it. Danke, Anna Asimakopoulou, für die Teilnahme der heutigen Diskussion. Ich freue mich auf deine introductory remarks.
Thank you very much, Lukas, for our excellent cooperation and for inviting me to be amongst this very distinguished set of panelists today. It's actually less than a month until Israel officially celebrates its 75th birthday on the 14th of May, so this is the perfect time for us to have this conversation. Only, Lucas, next time happy hour has to have some alcohol. I mean, we can't.
That's right.
This is not a real happy hour unless there's some wine, right? So, anyway, at a time when Israel's security situation is so incredibly tense, I think the anniversary reminds us that this is nothing new. In fact, just as the echoes of David Ben-Gurion reading the Declaration of Independence in the Tel Aviv Museum had subsided, the Arab-Israeli war began. The State of Israel came into being on May 14th, and the war started on May 15th. So it's those very individual circumstances that Israel has always found itself in as a democratic state which we need to talk about. Israel is a democracy, and it's a very lively democracy. It's the only democracy in the region, and contrary to what many of its detractors would argue, Israel is also a very progressive democracy, progressive in European terms, progressive in European values. And we can point to issues like women's rights, we can point to issues like LGBT rights, the welfare states. I could go on in making that point. But Israel faces a lot of threats that we in Europe don't face. And it has to keep constant guard and take the necessary precautions to protect its citizens, to protect the state itself in a way that we here in Europe don't actually have to. And so we in Europe have to better understand this point. We have to understand and account for that. And those of us who do appreciate it need to help make others more aware of the situation as well. But we aren't short of reminders, sadly, regular reminders of what Israel is up against. Just over a week ago, we saw the largest attack on Israel since the war of 2006. 34 missiles were fired from Lebanon, and further attacks launched from Gaza. Both Tel Aviv and the West Bank were hit. We've seen innocent civilians targeted, tourists targeted. Many people have lost their lives. I think we have to draw a couple of conclusions from this. Firstly, there were 34 rockets fired, and the Iron Dome intercepted 25 of those. Even one death or one injury is, of course, one too many. But imagine the level of death and destruction if there were no Iron Dome. Imagine if all 34 rockets had hit their targets. And I ask you to do this because we have to comprehend just how horrific these terrorist attacks against Israel really are. These terrorists would kill hundreds in every attack if they could. And we need to remind people of this. We need to make people aware of just how grave the threat that Israel faces really is. Secondly, and this is a battle that we've given jointly with my esteemed colleague and chair, Lukas Mandl, we have to come back to the issue of Hezbollah. Because yes, it's Hamas who's responsible for these latest attacks, but Hamas is operating in Lebanon in full view of Hezbollah. This is not an accident. This is not an oversight. Hezbollah knows it. Hezbollah tolerates it. So we once again have to ramp up our pressure to have Hezbollah fully listed as a terrorist organization by the European Union. And these are the issues that we should be dealing with in the European Parliament, the concerns that the EU should be occupying itself with when it comes to Israel. But instead, too often, we see many in this House just looking for opportunities to criticize Israel. And last month, when we were here in Strasbourg, it was no different. We had a debate about Israel, about the judicial reforms and how this reflected on the state of democracy in Israel. Now, those who pushed for that debate were not driven by any genuine concern for Israel's democracy. They were actually driven by the usual wish to take any opportunity they can to criticize Israel. And all the usual suspects were there to deliver their condemnation when the debate happened. Nobody, of course, can ignore the level of feeling towards the proposed judicial reforms, both inside Israel, and because I visited the United States recently and had Seder with AJC in Washington, D.C., which was a great experience, inside and outside of Israel, including in the United States. However, as I pointed out in my speech in plenary, we need to have faith in the fundamental principles that underpin Israel and in the democratic process. And our faith is now, I think, emboldened because the reforms have been suspended. The government is having a rethink. Democracy and the democratic nature of Israel's institution have proven, once again, to be resilient. And this is something that we, as friends of Israel, need to remember in order to continue to defend Israel. Because after all, true friends will defend you, even in the most difficult circumstances, and will always give you the benefit of the doubt. And it's with the support of friends and allies around the world that I think we will help Israel to ensure that it celebrates many more anniversaries like this one. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna Asimakopoulou, for this clear message. I want to hand over the floor next to Reuven Azar. He serves as the ambassador of Israel to Romania today and was serving in the past in also very interesting roles like the head of the Israeli-American-Chinese Internal Task Force of the Foreign Ministry, as well as a Deputy National Security Advisor for Foreign Affairs for the Israeli Prime Minister, and in various different diplomatic roles in Washington, D.C. and in other parts of the world. Mr. Azar is also an expert on Iran and on economy, of course. I'm more than happy that you joined us today. I'm more than happy that Israel as a state is directly represented in this discussion, because what sense would it make to discuss 75 years of Israel and future perspectives to continue the success story without a representative of the State of Israel, but even such a high-ranking and experienced one. Thanks for joining. I always think the major part of the success story is that Israel has decided from the very beginning to do both at the same time, to meet the challenges of the threats from outside and to create and grow a civil society, economy, and everything. And maybe this is the most important success secret, to do both at the same time in order to be in the shape Israel is today. And this is an impressive shape, and this is one of the reasons why Israel is such a good and important partner for the European Union. Mr. Azar, Reuven Azar, the floor is yours, Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you, Lukas, Mr. Mandl, for initiating this and for your great support of the State of Israel. Thank you, of course, Anna, for being here, and of course, Mr. David Lega, thank you for being here as well. AJC, we've been working with AJC for many years, and I'm very proud that AJC is represented at the European level in different capitals. It is playing a very good role in representing Jewish American values and Israeli values as well, and European values. We are gathering in a very special moment because we are commemorating in Israel now the Holocaust Day, the Holocaust Remembrance Day, and it is celebrated in the day in which the Warsaw Ghetto insurgency happened, 80 years ago today. And from the lowest point in our history, in which Jews were completely defenseless, and a group of Jews in Warsaw, under the leadership of Mordechai Nilevich, decided to choose how to die against the Nazis. We are today celebrating 75 years to the State of Israel. And this is the miracle. This is the miracle that we face, that we are an empowered people, in addition to the fact that we are a democratic people and we hold to the values that are dear to all of us. This is a very special moment for us. And sometimes, you know, we like to mention what separates us, but I think that the things that unite us are much more powerful. And we are seeing it every day, because not only we have common relations that are very rich, but we also have common opportunities and common challenges that we are struggling together in a very progressive way, as Member of Parliament Asimakopoulou said. And I'll give you two examples that usually we don't speak about. One example is in the field of water. I was talking earlier with some of the members of the audience here that Israel is the world leader of water purification. We purify 90% of our sewage, and we utilize 70% of our crops. We grow them with purified water. Now, this has become a huge challenge in Europe as well, because especially Southern Europe is suffering from a severe drought. And my role as ambassador in Romania has been such that we are partnering today with the Romanian government to start a pilot project to use purified sewage water in one of the cities of Romania that is suffering from water scarcity. And this water, 50 million cubic meters, are going to be supplied to farmers. This is the future. And Brussels is very focused, but also very frustrated from the failure in Europe until now to purify water to the level that can be used for agriculture, because this is going to reduce human footprint. And if we want to save the environment, this is something that we can do together. So we are today sharing best practices with Romania, and we are ready to do it at the European level with the Commissioner of Environment. And this is something that Europe is investing a lot of money in, and it is frustrating because government, although there is European regulation, governments do not step up to the plate because of conservatism, because of the fact that governments don't have the practice how to do it, because the public is resentful sometimes. They don't want to, you need to overcome certain things. And here, again, we can like we work together on high-tech, on research. We have a tremendous programs of sharing research and technology. We can do that together as well. The second challenge that today is facing Europe is, of course, the security challenge. So if I would tell you a year and something ago that this is going to be one of the main challenges of Europe, you would laugh at me, right? But today, we are at that crossroads, unfortunately. And here again, I think Israel is playing a major role because we are facing those challenges, as Anna said, for the last 75 years and even before, and we have a lot to share. So one of the things, and again, I'll give you an example from Romania. We are trying, together with the Romanians, to broaden the Romanian military industrial base. Because today, a lot of countries are looking not just to purchase systems for their defense, and Israel is a world leader on aerial defense, for example, missile defense, but also in other fields. And today, we are co-producing with Romania different things, like advanced drones. There is negotiation with Germany to purchase aerial defense systems. We have, actually before the crisis, we have partnered with Greece in an amazing project of building the military pilot training school, a contract of $1.7 billion with Greece. And of course, we have signed a strategic partnership with Austria as well, as you well know, Lukas. So this is the future. The future requires this continuation of cooperation, not only in the fields that we were accustomed to cooperate, whether it be cultural or transport or research and development, but also in new fields. And here, Israel is going to become even more relevant for Europe. Okay? So we don't have champagne, but we have the water, we call it in Israel, this is the champagne of nature, right? This is becoming more precious and more important than alcoholic beverages, because this is the challenge of the future.
Sure.
So I raise it to you and to the success of Israel and for the relations between Europe and Israel.
That's very beautiful how we elaborate on the title of this format today on the happy hour of free speech, and we understand Anna is completely right. It would need some drinks, and we also understand also water can be a drink, even the champagne of nature. Many good insights, and also in terms of content, thanks for contributing with so much substance to this discussion. You have already mentioned David Lega, talking about champions in this very European Parliament beside Anna. Also, David Lega is a true contributor to this partnership between EU and Israel. In the case of David, especially in the field of the Abraham Accords, which might be yet maybe the only positive geopolitical development of the 21st century. Unfortunately, we have to mention that I don't know any other that can be really counted as directly and anonymously, so to speak, positive. This is the Abraham Accords, and David Lega is not only here, but especially here, a true contributor. Also on the panel with us is Anne-Sophie Sebban, Director of the American Jewish Committee Office in Paris. She also serves as a board member of the Association Française d'Études sur Israël. I tried to say it in French. At least the title of this important organization. You're also active in writing as a journalist and in putting op-eds in newspapers, as well as serving as a teacher, a lecturer on energy in Africa, obviously, among other things, which also sounds very interesting and future-oriented, as well as water. A purification, which was already mentioned by the ambassador. Thanks, Anne-Sophie, for joining. We highly appreciate excellent cooperation with the American Jewish Committee, also in the Brussels office, you in the Paris office, all over the world. We have really a good connection in terms of the values we defend all together. Thanks for joining. I look forward to your contribution to this discussion.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me today. I'm very honored, and I have to say impressed to speak among such an esteemed panel. I actually studied for my PhD in geopolitics, the relations between Israel and Africa. And That's how I discovered all the added value that Israel brought to the African continent. But this is not what I will reflect on for my contribution to this. As I was thinking about what the 75th anniversary of Israel inspires me, and as I was told that it's a free speech panel, I decided to reflect on some maybe more philosophical angle of what it can teaches us, and I can't help myself but reflecting on what the current situation in Israel tells us, and if we take a step back and talk about it in the context or in the perspective of the creation of Israel and of the uniqueness of its creation. We know that Israel was created, and the very success of its creation was based on a compromise between religious and secular, a compromise between different visions of Zionism, a compromise with the Brits, a compromise with other Occidental nations for gaining support when Israel was created at the United Nations, a compromise between different groups, between different minorities. And this is the miracle. The miracle of Israel resides in its unique capacity to produce compromise and to create a national cohesion out of such a diverse people, which is the Jewish people, which is unique in this sense. And 75 years after this first miracle, we can observe that this notion of compromise is challenged internally, especially at a time when, as it was said before, Israel is threatened more than ever by Iran, by a new rise in terrorist attacks, etc. And yet we've seen on both sides, we've seen hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, and we've seen a government that decided to make a pause. And we can make a comparison with France. I'm coming from France, so the comparison these days is very interesting. And I was asked by many journalists to draw this comparison. You know, we are facing a lot of demonstrations and strikes around the reform on pension. And it's what happened in Israel is as if, last Friday the Constitutional Council decided on the reform and validated the reform. And it's as if after this decision, 7 million of French people were going in the streets. And I think this is teaching us a lesson. And no one knows what will happen in the coming weeks, what the coming weeks will offer us. But as friends of Israel and as strong believer that in one way or another, Israel will thrive and will succeed, I think this 75th anniversary invites us all to reflect on this notion of compromise. And we all face in many European countries, in the United States, and you know that the American Jewish community is defending the reinforcement of the transatlantic relations. We are both facing on both sides of the Atlantic internal political polarizations that is threatening our democracies. And if Israel overcomes this crisis, and I'm convinced that it will, and because of its uniqueness, I'm pretty sure that for us, it should be a wake-up call to take the road of compromise again, and to realize that this is key, this is existential for our democracies. And I'm pretty sure that for this 75th anniversary, therefore, Israel will remain, as we say, a light for the nation, a light unto the nations.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this reflection. As promised, the philosophical angle, as you said in the beginning, and this is exactly what this happy hour free speech is also meant for. David is obviously leaving. I know that, but I would really be grateful if you could share with us some thoughts on the Abraham Accords for 1, 2, or 3 minutes. Would that be possible? By that way, I ask Mr. Persson, who is online connected, for a little patience, because it's such a privilege to have David Lega with us that I want to use the opportunity in this year, 75th birthday of Israel, on the big gift Israel gives to the world by the Abraham Accords. David.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all the speakers being here as well. I'm really sorry that I have to leave, but you know these days here, it's really tight for all of us. When I listened to you in the beginning, I remember my last visit to Yad Vashem. And in the beginning of Yad Vashem, you hear, I don't remember the year, but you hear these schoolgirls from early 1900s singing Hatikva, so many years before Israel even existed. And I think that, for me, is probably the strongest moment inside Yad Vashem in the beginning, when you hear about the dream that the Jewish people have had for so many years. And as you all said, now for 75 years, it is still a miracle, but now we tend to take it for granted, which is important, but also dangerous if we sit back and relax, because we can never sit back and relax. And I think that is why the Abraham Accords are so important and so vital, to find the next step in the peace process of the Middle East. And I see now, for the first time in the European Parliament, movements toward actually acknowledging this, to encouraging it, to continue talking to Israel, to finally, after, as you all said and talked about, the Russia's aggression on Ukraine, we see the importance of siding with friends. We see the importance of having one democratic state in the Middle East. So I will absolutely continue to do my best, and I hope that we can present more initiatives from the European Parliament together with the Abraham Accords as soon as possible. And I hope to continue that journey as soon as possible. But thank you so much, and I apologize for having to leave.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
You're going to the meeting. I would also be supposed to be to participate. So thanks for being in both places and also for sharing your thoughts on that. Actually, I hope the connection works online with Anders Persson. He serves as a professor for policy studies, political science at the Linnaeus University in Sweden. His focus is regarding the role of EU related to the Israel-Palestine conflict, as it is called in the papers. Mr. Persson was recommended to us by the European Parliament Research Service. He publishes a lot, among others in the Jerusalem Post, Al Jazeera English, Politico EU, EU Observer, and other fields. I'm more than happy, Mr. Persson, that you join us today. And I look forward to your contribution and maybe some food for thought and even more food for discussion, I can imagine. Thanks for joining. Online, regards from Strasbourg to Sweden, I suppose, from the European Parliament to your university. The floor is yours. I hope you can hear us and we can hear you. Mr. Persson?
Thank you, Mr. Mandl. And can you all hear me and see me?
Yeah, it works perfectly.
Yeah, let me know if I speak too fast, because it's my first time speaking to the European Parliament. I am delighted to be here, and many thanks for inviting me. I'm an academic, so I will focus my remarks today on a sort of data-driven and fact-based analysis of Israel's success story over the past 75 years. And I will focus my remarks on three things: Israel's democracy, Israel's economy, and Israel's solidarity. I'll start by saying a few words about Israel's democracy. It is 50 years ago this year, 2023, that Freedom House began its democracy rating project, Freedom in the World. And Israel has always been ranked as a democracy by Freedom House, and it's the same with the other two leading democracy rating indexes, Varieties of Democracy and the Economist rating indexes. That is an important fact to start mentioning. And also adding to that, there is no serious scholar in the democracy literature that would question that Israel is a democracy. And I would have no problem saying that Israel's first and foremost achievement over these 75 years is to having successfully integrated Jews from around the world, many of whom came from authoritarian contexts into a democratic society. And that I think is very important to say. I move over to say a few words about Israel's economy. I just came from a lecture today where I taught my students the development successes in East Asia. And there we're often talking about 4 Asian tigers: Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and South Korea. Israel's economic success is, I think, a very underestimated and also underreported story. Today, Israel is performing far ahead of 3 of the 4 Asian tigers. It's behind Singapore, but far ahead of the other 3. So Israel should also be called an economic tiger. Before I prepared my remarks today, I went into the IMF website to get a hold of the latest economic data. And to my surprise, for the first time in my life, I saw that Israel was even ranked above Sweden. So Israel's GDP per capita in nominal terms or current prices was ahead of Sweden, and indeed ahead of most West European countries. And I wrote on my Twitter account this morning that never in my life had I believed to see that Israel would be ranked ahead of Sweden. I belong to the last generations of Europeans who went to Israel as a volunteer on a kibbutz. It was 20 years ago in my case. And I remember that 20 years ago there was a gap in economy. I mean, I remember the Israelis were very impressed by my new phone and my sunglasses and this kind of things. That's not the case anymore. So Israel's success story when it comes to an economic perspective is truly remarkable. Let me move over and say a few words about Israeli solidarity. I come from Northern Europe, and my parents raised me in a typical sort of Northern European tradition, which means mind your own business, don't interact with strangers. If you see trouble, violence, or accidents, walk away from it. It's for the police and ambulances to deal with. That's very far from the Israeli experience. It is often said that an Israeli would help an old lady to cross the street, even if she doesn't want to, which is very, very true. And one of my Facebook friends, Larry Durfner, wrote a book a couple of years ago that left a lasting impression on me. And he told a story of one of his friends who went to Switzerland, to Bern, to a fancy restaurant there. And the Israeli couple were having a dinner. And suddenly, one of the diners collapsed. An old man had a stroke or something, was lying unconscious on the floor. And nobody moved. Everybody was minding their own business, didn't help. It was only the Israelis that caused enough trouble and noise so that somebody, after a while, bothered to call an ambulance. And also I remember a very famous quote by the late Israeli author Amos Oz, who said a couple of years ago that if I am fated to fall on the street, I would like to do it in Israel. Not in New York, not in Paris, not in London. I would like to do it in Israel because I know that in Israel I will be picked up like this, which is absolutely true and very different from the tradition that I am raised in. Let me summarize by saying that all these 3 things, democracy, economy, and solidarity, is imperiled by what we see on the streets in Israel today. Even if Israel is a successful democracy, the ratings over the past 10 years have been quite bad. And these same rating indexes, especially Freedom House and VDEM, have warned for 10 years now that Israeli democracy is in decline because of 2 reasons. The illiberal laws in the Knesset and the authoritarian tendencies of the Prime Minister. And these 2 trends are, of course, climaxing on the streets right now. And we don't know exactly what will happen. This is also having an effect, of course, on Israel's economy. We saw Israel's economy being downgraded by Moody's earlier this week. And perhaps also an effect on Israeli solidarity. Not that Israelis no longer will help old ladies to cross the street, but we see a fragmentation in the Israeli society, perhaps sort of also a tribalization, which may be very difficult to handle in the future. And of course, on top of this, we see that the conflict with the Palestinians remained unsolved. And a lot of data is pointing in the absolute wrong direction here, with a level of violence, casualties, terror attacks, Israeli raids, settler violence. So it's also something to pay attention to. I stop there, and thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Persson. I can imagine you can still listen to the discussion here in the room. The habit would be that participants take the floor, address remarks, brief ones, or questions, or both. And then we have a final round on the panel, and we finish on time at 7 because the interpreters reserved their time for us until 7, and we should not be longer than that. Who may I give the floor? Who is interested to raise a question or to put a remark on the table? Please, the floor is yours.
Bonjour. J'aimerais poser une question à Monsieur l'ambassadeur Azar. En fait, vous avez parlé dans le cadre sécuritaire d'une collaboration militaire d'Israël avec la Roumanie, de projets avec la Grèce et d'un partenariat stratégique avec l'Autriche. Alors, je voulais savoir, est-ce qu'il n'y a que des collaborations avec les pays européens individuellement, ou il y a aussi une coopération avec l'Union européenne dans son ensemble? Merci.
Thank you. If I may, I just ask once whether there is the one or the other additional remark or question from the audience. Is this the case? If not, usually in this parliament people extra ask for speaking time and then it's very limited and so on. But today a lot has been said. I've learned already a lot due to the remarks on the panel. So I would make a final round, the other way around as we had it in the beginning. This is why it was not much from the audience, but anyway, Mr. Persson, you will have the floor once again for a final round of the panel, and then I hand over the floor to the other panelists the other way around as we had it in the beginning. So if the connection again would work, Mr. Persson would again be handed over the floor to. Looks like. Perfect.
Yeah,
we can see you, we can hear you.
Yeah, great. Well, I think I would like to start by saying that, I mean, I agree completely that the first 75 years of Israel has been a remarkable success story from many points of view, as I alluded to. But sort of the rest of the title is continuing the success story. I would put a question mark after that, because I think the situation right now is very serious, and there are a lot of clouds in the sky. We see I think a high likelihood of a serious outbreak of violence. It's important to keep in mind that often when people believe that there will be violence, it doesn't break out. This was, for example, the case during the Arab Spring in 2011, during Trump's era as president, whereas violence in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict often happens when people don't expect it. 1973, First Intifada, 2006 war, and these kind of things. There is also, I think, a difficult discussion going on. There are a couple of difficult discussions going on in Europe at the moment. One is a sort of a transformation of the conflict. I mean, I was raised by learning that it was a conflict. It was first called the Israeli-Arab conflict and later the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I see, for example, that there is a new discussion emerging, especially among young people, that this is a permanent situation of something. The critics say it's a permanent situation of the permanent occupation. Those who are even more critical say that it's apartheid, even settler colonialism, some people say, whereas many Europeans struggle to define the situation and have a hard time sort of describing what they see and how to interpret it. And I think it's the same thing with the outbreak of violence that we see at the moment, where we see sort of terror attacks, Israeli raids, we see rocket fire for a couple of days, and then it's calm, and then it happens again. Very difficult sort of to conceptualize and say what kind of terms we should use to describe the situation. Also, I think I would say that there are clouds when it comes to the Abraham Accords. I am also positive towards them. I have a lot of criticism. The lack of public support, I think, in the Arab world, especially in the Gulf, is a very serious issue. And also the prospects for normalizing with Saudi Arabia seems to be more dim than before, after they have normalized with Iran and now inviting Hamas. So there are, I think, a lot of clouds on the horizon when it comes to what is going on at the moment, both domestically in Israel and also when it comes to the surrounding environment, because what is called the radical axis, or Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, they seem to have been emboldened by recent events, by the war in Ukraine, by China's role, and I think these are major, big strategic factors that we don't really know how they will play out over the future.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe it's also an opportunity to address remarks by the other panelists in this final panel round, and that's why I give the floor to Anne-Sophie now for these final remarks. Anne-Sophie.
Sure. I may want to add two remarks. One reflecting on what I said before, but just to warn us about the friends of Israel's democracy. I think that we have to be careful and distinguish between those who today are worried about the situation, but are aware that all democracies are facing difficulties and that are hoping that Israel will overcome this situation and are confident that it will. And those who are using, as it was mentioned, I think earlier by Mrs. Asimakopoulou, that are using this year as a pretext to reinforce their old enterprise of delegitimizing Israel. And I can relate on what's happening these days in France, and I can really distinguish between those who haven't waited for the Israeli government to be the most righteous one in its history to say that Israel's democracy is in danger or doesn't exist at all, etc., etc. And I think that we have to double our efforts in our support of Israel today, because the enemies of Israel are more than ever ready to use the current crisis to attack it. That's the point that I wanted to make. And the second one was about the Abraham Accords, because I actually hesitated to speak about it for my initial remarks, just for us to take a step back as well and to see that, as it was mentioned earlier, when Israel was created, the day after the surrounded Arab state declared war to Israel. And today, no matter what are the latest developments, Israel has never been that well integrated in the Middle East. And I think that the real friends of Israel should accompany and reinforce this movement by all means. And because I hear a lot of comments these days as well about the Abraham Accords that are fragilized, etc., etc. And I think that we also have to remind this new reality that is extraordinary. I had the occasion last year to go to the Emirates during the Universal Expo and to attend an event where the Jerusalem Orchestra was performing in front of an audience of Muslim, Arabs, Christians together singing in Hebrew and Arabic. And I was moved to tears to see that and to realize that a few years earlier, this would have never been possible. And I think that we have also to take a pause at this occasion of the 75th anniversary and to celebrate it.
Thank you. Very important remarks. Reuven, may I ask you for your final remark, and thanks for your patience because you immediately wanted to go to the question. Now is the time.
Actually, it's a privilege to speak among the last. It's always a privilege. I would say three things. First of all, in response to the distinguished guest question, yes, we are cooperating with Europe at the European level as well, mainly through NATO, of course, especially now the last important cooperation we had is regarding the threat of drones. It is a proliferation that is coming from Iran, as you know, and now is part of the war against Ukraine. Today, Iran is proliferating weapons such as missiles and drones that are in the hands of terrorist organizations and states. This is composing a huge threat towards Europe, and we are sharing intelligence and also methods of air defense with NATO. We are ready to expand that cooperation and we'll continue with it. When it comes to the European Union, usually the European Union is less concentrated on security issues, but we've been developing a relationship with the Situation Center at the European Union in Brussels, cooperating in intelligence to the degree that we can. And of course, there's the whole issue of home affairs, and today the issue of guarding borders is very important, so we are cooperating in that regard at the individual level with individual countries as well. The second thing I wanted to say is that, yes, there are always threats, but I think we cannot overstate them. First of all, regarding setbacks, yes, after the peace with Egypt, we had a setback. Anwar Sadat was assassinated, and the peace with Egypt continued to exist. After the Oslo Accords, Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated. But the Palestinian Authority exists until today, and that is because the Israeli public is completely convinced that it doesn't want to control the daily lives of Palestinians, and we are not intending to go back into the Gaza Strip to control it. Now we have to find a way to grant our Palestinian neighbors the power to rule themselves without the possibility to threat us. And this is the challenge we are facing. We're going to continue to face this challenge until we find partners on the other side that will be able to take up this challenge of self-governing while not threatening the state of Israel. And when it comes to the Abraham Accords, it's no wonder that Iran has sensed that the Abraham Accords is a direct threat on Iran, because Israel today has intimate security relationship with countries in the Arab Gulf. We are concentrated in common, let's say, meetings and common cooperation under CENTCOM, the American Command of the Middle East, planning together how to defend ourselves from the Iranian threats. This is a very important development that Iran naturally feels threatened from. And they are trying to create a situation in which Israel is attacked from many fronts, to create that sense. Now, Israel, of course, has to take it into account, but we don't have to overstate it, because it is very clear that Iran wants us to be in continuous war. But Israel thrives in peace. So we are not going to overreact. We're going to deal with our threats proportionately. And in this way, we will continue to be able to deal with the threats, but also to continue to thrive as a people, culturally and economy-wise. And just to put a cherry on it, my third point is continuing what Mr. Persson said regarding the values. There is in Israel an organization called United Hatzalah. It was founded by an ultra-Orthodox Jew that decided that he's going to save lives in Israel. And he took the initiative, not the state, of reducing the time in which any patient or any victim gets treatment from an ambulance from an average of 15-20 minutes to almost zero. How did he achieve that? He gathered volunteers from all over Israel, more than 4,000 volunteers, that are ready with scooters, and they can reach any person in 2 or 3 minutes from the moment you get the report. In this way, this guy has managed to save multiple lives. This is, coincides with the value in Judaism, that if you save one life, it's like you save the entire world. Now, this model is being now duplicated all over the world. It's a new invention on how to save lives that was the initiative of one person. It is always civil society, it is always private entrepreneurship that is going to change the world, and not just governments, and not just progressive policies, but progressive initiatives of people that usually don't tend to call progressive, but they are. Thank you.
Yeah, governments just decide whether they grant the freedom to the markets and to the enterprises and to the innovators to innovate, actually. And this is what governments can do, and it's very important to state also that and to share this example. I didn't know it, and it should be spread also as a message. Anna Asimakopoulou, famous last words from your side for this discussion, of course.
Very, very few last words, because thank you again for this wonderful opportunity, and for I feel enriched by everything that I've heard from our panelists and guests. As a person who represents in this parliament the birthplace of democracy, Greece, I can only say that democracy can be very messy. It can take a long time. It can create many problems. But in the end, as far as I'm concerned, I don't really know any better way of governance than democracy. So I intend to defend it until the end. And Israel is a democracy, and that's a very important thing. And obviously, it's not a perfect democracy, but it still deserves to be supported. Thank you.
Thank you. So I tried to make a joke, and you really shared very important last words with us, which are encouraging to continue this path from our side, at least for the contribution for this partnership, and from Israeli side, to continue this success story after 75 years for 75 more and 75 more and so on and so on. This is what we look forward to. Thanks for joining today's discussion. Thanks for those who connected with us in this live stream. I look forward to understand how it worked, because it was the first time we also took the initiative to have this live stream. We at least will have a tape and share it. And next month in May, we will have a very special discussion in this happy hour free speech meeting among APAS, accredited parliamentary assistants, because they were a topic of politics in the last weeks and months due to the one or the other reason. So APAS from various different political groups or serving for members from various different political groups will discuss what it means to be a political advisor as an accredited parliamentary assistant. Let's see, May 8th will be the day when we will discuss that. 75 years of Israel was the topic of today, a very positive topic in these crucial political times. Thanks for joining. Have a good evening, all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next time. But we have the champagne of nature.
Yes, we have the shift.